In 1955, you could tell how comfortable a family was before ever stepping through their front door. You'd notice the little things. One family could close a door and have privacy most children on the block never got. Across the street, a house stayed comfortable in a way that felt almost unbelievable in August. And at the end of the block, there was one small change in the driveway that quietly told everyone that family had moved up. We are going to go through 20 things that feel completely normal today that were genuine luxuries in the 1950s and early 1960s. Not the obvious stuff like color TV or space travel. We are talking about things sitting in your kitchen drawer, your garage, your bathroom, and your living room right now that a 1950s family would have looked at differently. Let us count down. Number 20. Complete indoor plumbing. This one sounds almost too basic to be on the list, but that is exactly the point. In the 1950s, indoor plumbing was still a milestone, not a given. The census tells us that around 1/3 of homes were still missing complete plumbing in 1950, and even by 1960, it was closer to 1 in 6. Complete plumbing meant a flush toilet, a bathtub or shower, and both hot and cold running water for private use. For families moving out of older rural homes or crowded city rentals, getting a private bathroom was a genuine life upgrade. The luxury was not glamour. It was privacy and sanitation as well as not having to organize your morning around a shared facility. Think about what shared facility actually meant in practice. In many older city buildings and rural properties, multiple families used the same toilet, the same bathtub, the same water pump. You scheduled your morning around other people's schedules. Getting ready for work or school was a coordination problem, not just a personal routine. A private bathroom with hot running water meant you could take a bath when you wanted in private, without knocking on anyone's door or waiting your turn. That shift from shared to private was enormous, and we have been taking it for granted ever since. Next time you walk into your bathroom and flip a light switch, that is worth a second of appreciation. Number 19. A picture window in the living room. A big front window seems totally ordinary in older suburban homes today, but in the 1950s, it could make a modest house feel dramatically more modern. The National Park Service describes large picture windows as a popular feature of 1950s ranch houses because they brought sunlight into living spaces and helped blur the line between indoors and outdoors. That sounds simple, but at the time, it changed the whole feel of a home. It made the living room brighter, larger, and more connected to the new suburban landscape outside. It also quietly turned the home into a kind of stage because neighbors could see your lamps, your furniture, your Christmas tree. The luxury was not just glass. It was the ability to display a comfortable life from the curb. There is something interesting about that idea, because picture windows were not just about what you could see looking out. They were about what other people could see looking in. The furniture you arranged near that window, the lamp you put in the corner, the way the room looked on a winter evening when the lights were on inside. All of that was visible from the street. In a neighborhood of modest homes that looked very similar from the outside, a well-lit living room with a big picture window was one of the few ways a family could signal that things were going well inside. That is a very human thing, and it has not changed much. Number 18. Paper towels. A roll of paper towels is so invisible in most kitchens today that people barely notice when they run out until they really need one. But before disposable kitchen paper became common, families used dish towels, rags, flour sacks, and old clothing scraps for every spill and every mess. The luxury was not that paper towels were fancy. It was that you could use something once and just throw the mess away. That was a new kind of cleanliness. And it saved laundry, which mattered a whole lot more when washing and drying clothes took real household time and effort. Companies like Scott and Kimberly-Clark heavily marketed the hygienic appeal of disposable paper, and families bought into it fast once they could afford to. There is a reason the marketing leaned so hard on hygiene. When you are wiping up a raw chicken spill or cleaning a sick child's mess with a cloth rag, you then have to wash that rag and make sure it is clean before using it again. With a paper towel, you use it once, throw it away, and the problem is gone. That is not laziness. That is a genuinely different relationship with cleanliness and contamination. For a 1950s housewife managing a household without a dishwasher, without a dryer, and with a full week of laundry to manage, one less thing to wash was not trivial. It was a small but real relief. Number 17. Wall-to-wall carpeting. Before wall-to-wall carpeting spread through American homes, most floors were hardwood with area rugs placed here and there. A fully carpeted room felt softer, quieter, warmer, and more finished in a way that hard floors simply did not. In the 1950s, wall-to-wall carpeting became more accessible, but it still carried the feeling of a comfort that had previously been out of reach for most families. The luxury was sensory. Sound was muffled, feet felt warmer in the morning, and children could sit on the floor without a second thought. There was also something about the visual completeness of a carpeted room. When the whole floor was covered in one continuous material, the room looked done. It looked intentional. Hardwood floors with scattered rugs could look a little piecemeal, a little like you were still working towards something. Wall-to-wall said you had arrived. It said the room was finished and comfortable and cared for. Today, wall-to-wall carpet can actually feel dated or even undesirable, especially as hardwood floors have come back into fashion. That reversal alone tells you how completely the luxury became ordinary, and then how ordinary became unfashionable. The whole cycle happened within about 50 years. Number 16. A garage or carport. Today, a suburban home without some kind of covered parking feels incomplete. But in the 1950s, even new homes did not automatically include it. One comparison of new house features from 1956 notes that only about half of new homes had a garage. Levittown-style post-war homes showed just how modest many of those builds were. Some models had no garage at all, and carports were added or emphasized as the designs evolved. Covered parking was a practical luxury, especially when cars were becoming central to suburban life. The thing is, a car in the 1950s was not just transportation. It was often one of the most expensive things a family owned. Leaving it outside in the rain, the snow, the summer heat, the hail, that was real exposure for a real investment. A garage or carport meant less ice scraping in the morning, less weather damage to the vehicle, more storage space for tools and seasonal items, and a more finished-looking property overall. It also gave the home a sense of permanence, like the family was settled and prepared. Small things that added up fast, and most people today would not even consider a home without some version of it. Number 15. Aluminum foil. A roll of foil is one of those things that feels like it has always existed, but household aluminum foil was still becoming part of ordinary cooking life after World War II. Reynolds Wrap was first released in 1947, and the company spent the 1950s pushing uses like outdoor grilling and casual cooking. Foil made leftovers easier, grilling cleaner, lunches neater, and oven cleanup less of a project. It also had a genuinely space-age feeling at the time, because aluminum was tied to airplanes, defense manufacturing, and modern industry. The same material that went into aircraft fuselages and military equipment was now sitting in your kitchen drawer, ready to wrap a sandwich or cover a casserole dish. Number 14. Long-distance phone calls. Today, calling across the country costs nothing if you have a mobile plan or any internet app. In the 1950s, a long-distance call was something people noticed, planned, and sometimes kept short because toll calls cost real money. Before direct distance dialing became common, many long-distance calls required operator assistance, and the whole process was slower and more formal. That is why older generations remembered phrases like station-to-station and person-to-person calls. Those were not just technical terms. They reflected a whole different relationship with distance and communication. Think about what that actually means in daily life. If your sister moved to another state, you did not just pick up the phone whenever you felt like chatting. You might write a letter instead, because a letter was free and a long-distance call was not. When you did call, you watched the clock, kept the conversation to the important things, and hung up feeling like you had spent something. Calling your grandmother in another state was a small event. You planned it. The luxury was not the phone itself. It was the ability to talk instantly to someone hundreds of miles away without writing a letter or waiting for a visit, and to do it without the conversation feeling like it was costing you money with every passing minute. Number 13. Freezer space. Refrigeration was already widespread by 1950, but freezer-based convenience was still reshaping how families thought about food. The 1950 census reported that about 4 out of 5 homes had mechanical refrigeration, but what you could actually do with a freezer was still becoming part of everyday life. Frozen orange juice concentrate is a perfect example. The Smithsonian documents how the 6-ounce frozen can represented how many Americans got their morning juice in the 1950s and 1960s. The luxury was year-round convenience. No squeezing oranges, no wasting fruit, no shopping every 2 days. Before the freezer became a real tool in the kitchen, families had to shop much more often, plan meals around what was fresh and available, and accept that certain foods simply were not accessible in certain seasons. A freezer changed all of that. It meant you could buy in bulk when prices were good, store leftovers for later in the week, and have a backup plan for dinner when the day went sideways. It also meant that a family with a full freezer felt genuinely prepared in a way that felt secure. Today, freezer storage is so normal that people forget it once completely changed breakfast, leftovers, meal planning, and what it meant to have a well-stocked kitchen. Number 12. A clothes dryer. The Bureau of Labor Statistics puts dryer ownership at roughly 10% of U.S. households by the mid-1950s. The price was around $230 at the time, which BLS equates to roughly $1,600 in $2,000, so this was not a casual purchase. Before a dryer, laundry depended on weather, clotheslines, basement lines, and the weekly rhythm of drying everything in plain view. The underrated angle here is privacy. Sheets, diapers, underclothes, and work clothes no longer had to hang where the whole neighborhood could see them. That quiet dignity was part of what made a dryer feel like a luxury. But there was also the practical reality of weather. If you washed on Monday and it rained all week, your laundry sat damp and musty until the sun came back. A dryer removed that dependency entirely. Laundry became a task you could complete start to finish in a single day, regardless of what was happening outside. Today, most people would not consider renting an apartment without one, and that expectation happened within one generation. Number 11. Having a telephone at home. A home telephone feels almost quaint now in a world where everyone carries one in their pocket. But in 1960, the census tells us that roughly 1 in 5 households had no telephone available at all. That made a phone more than a social convenience. It affected emergencies, doctor calls, job opportunities, school messages, and family news. A household without a phone might rely on a neighbor's line, a payphone down the street, or a workplace phone for anything urgent. Think about that for a second. If your child got hurt at school, the school had no way to reach you directly. They might send another child to knock on a neighbor's door, or ask someone to walk over to your house, or wait until you came to pick up your kid and tell you in person. No way to call 911 from home. No way to call the doctor at midnight. A household telephone was not just communication. It was access to the faster world, and 1 in 5 families in 1960 still did not have it. Number 10. A dishwasher. A dishwasher today is often treated as a basic kitchen feature, but in 1958, only about 4% of American households had one. That means the overwhelming majority of families washed every dish, every pot, every glass, by hand after every single meal, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, with a family of 4 or 5 people. That is an enormous amount of hand washing, and it was not optional. You could not leave dishes piled in the sink for a machine to handle later. You washed them, dried them, and put them away every time. A dishwasher also required the right plumbing, the right kitchen layout, enough hot water, and a budget that could absorb a major appliance purchase. That made it especially connected to new homes, remodeled kitchens, and families trying to signal that they had arrived. There was a real status element to it. If you had a dishwasher, your kitchen looked planned and modern. If you did not, you were still doing things the way your grandmother did. Number 9. TV dinners. A frozen TV dinner looks cheap today, but in the 1950s it sat at the intersection of several luxuries at once. You needed a freezer, an oven, a television, and a household willing to eat in a completely new way. In 1954, the first full year of production, Swanson sold 10 million trays, which tells you how quickly the concept grabbed attention. The Smithsonian notes that the TV dinner tapped into middle-class excitement around television and the appeal of reduced cleanup through its disposable-style tray. The real novelty was not the food. The turkey and the peas and the little compartment of potatoes were not the point. The point was the idea that dinner could be individual, screen-friendly, and low cleanup all at once. You did not have to set the table. You did not have to serve from a pot. You did not have to coordinate everyone sitting down at the same time. The TV dinner was a product designed around a new behavior, watching television as the centerpiece of an evening. And it arrived almost exactly when that behavior was becoming mainstream. Sound familiar? The TV dinner was basically the first version of food designed around screen time, and it happened 70 years ago. Number 8. A second car. Cars were becoming common by the 1950s, but a second car was still a much bigger signal. Data from 1960 shows that 56.9% of households had one vehicle, but only 19% had 2, and just 2.5% had 3 or more. That means a 2-car driveway was not just transportation. It meant extra income, extra insurance money, extra gas money, and a suburban lifestyle built around real mobility. The hidden luxury was independence inside the household. In a one-car family, the person who drove that car to work essentially controlled the family's mobility for the whole day. The other adult was stuck at home, or dependent on a bus, or waiting for someone else to give them a ride. With 2 cars, both adults could move independently. One could go to work while the other could handle errands, take kids to appointments, or visit family without waiting. That kind of daily freedom is so normal now that it barely registers. But in the 1950s, that second set of keys was a signal that a family had truly made it, and only about 1 in 5 households had gotten there. Number 7. Home air conditioning. The percentage of American households with air conditioning was trivially small until the late 1950s, and for most of the decade, the idea of cooling your own home was genuinely out of reach for the average family. Air conditioning was invented in 1902 by Willis Carrier, but for its first few decades it was strictly a commercial technology, so the public's first experience with mechanical cooling was not at home. It was at the movies on a hot Saturday afternoon, or walking into a department store in July and feeling that first blast of cool air hit you at the door. The real shift began after World War II, when manufacturers pivoted from wartime production back to consumer goods. Companies like Frigidaire and Carrier had been in the air conditioning market since the 1910s, but the early 1950s brought a wave of new competitors. RCA entered the market in 1951, offering window units ranging from $229.50 to $399.50, roughly $2,700 to $4,700 in today's dollars. So even the entry-level option was a serious purchase. By the end of the decade, most American homes still had no air conditioning at all. When a family did have cooling at home, they were bringing a public luxury into private life, and the ripple effect went well beyond comfort. Number 6. Keeping a pet purely for companionship. This is the one that surprises people. An estimated 71% of U.S. households, or about 94 million families, own a pet, according to the 2024 to 2025 National Pet Owners Survey conducted by the American Pet Products Association. Dogs, cats, fish, hamsters, they are everywhere, and they are almost entirely kept for emotional reasons. For most of human history, animals around the home had a job. Dogs were valued for guarding, hunting, herding, and warning the family when strangers came near. Cats were useful for controlling mice around barns, basements, and kitchens. That does not mean people did not love their animals. The human-animal bond is very old, and plenty of farm dogs were also beloved family companions. But the animal still had a function. It still earned its keep in a practical sense. The shift toward keeping an animal purely for emotional reasons, with no practical justification at all, was something that required a certain level of financial comfort to sustain. The post-war consumer economy helped make that shift more normal. Suddenly, you did not need a yard or a farm to justify keeping an animal. You could have a cat in a suburban house, feeding it from a bag, with a litter box in the bathroom, and the whole arrangement was clean, contained, and manageable. The real luxury was keeping an animal whose main job was emotional, not practical. Feeding it, housing it, taking it to the vet, buying packaged food and toys and collars, simply because it made the household feel warmer and more alive. Today, 97% of pet owners consider their pets to be a part of the family. That shift from working animal to family member is one of the quietest and most profound changes in everyday American life. Number 5. A washing machine. Hand-washing laundry was a serious, time-consuming physical task. It took hours, it was hard on the hands, and it had to happen regularly, no matter what else was going on in the household. You could not skip laundry day the way you might skip vacuuming. Clothes needed to be clean, and before a machine did it for you, that meant you did it yourself, by hand, with a washboard and a tub of hot water, or hauling everything to a communal laundry facility if you lived in a city. A washing machine did not just save time, it freed up an entire category of labor that had previously been unavoidable. For families who got one in the 1950s, the weekly wash went from a half-day physical project to something you started in the morning and mostly ignored while it ran. You loaded it, set it going, and went to do other things. That was a completely new experience. The ripple effect on household life was enormous. More time for work, for children, for rest, for anything other than standing over a tub scrubbing fabric. That machine sitting in your laundry room right now represents a freedom that earlier generations would have found genuinely hard to believe. Number 4. A private bedroom for children. In a lot of older homes and smaller post-war builds, children shared bedrooms, sometimes 2 or 3 kids to a room. The idea that a child would have their own private space, their own walls, their own door, their own quiet, was not a standard expectation. It was something families worked toward. The post-war housing boom started to change this as new suburban homes were built with more bedrooms, but even then, it was not universal. Consider what sharing a bedroom actually meant for a child. If you were trying to do homework and your younger sibling was playing, or you wanted to read after bedtime and the other kids were already asleep, or you needed a few minutes alone after a hard day at school, none of that was easily available. Privacy was not something children expected. It was something lucky children had. A child with their own room had space to think, to read, to develop a sense of self that shared rooms made harder to come by. Today, parents feel guilty if kids have to share a room, and that guilt itself tells you how completely the expectation has shifted. Number 3. Frozen orange juice. This one sounds small, but it changed mornings in America. Before frozen concentrate, getting orange juice meant buying fresh oranges and squeezing them by hand every single time. If oranges were out of season or too expensive at the store, you just did not have orange juice that week. The Smithsonian documents how the 6-ounce frozen can of orange juice concentrate became a staple of 1950s and 1960s kitchens, representing a new kind of year-round convenience. No seasonal limitations, no waste, no effort. You pulled a can from the freezer, added water, stirred, and breakfast was done. That is so normal today that it barely registers. But think about what it actually changed. It meant that a family in Minnesota in January could have orange juice at breakfast, the same as a family in Florida in July. It meant that a tired parent on a Tuesday morning did not have to stand at the counter cutting and squeezing fruit before the kids left for school. That little frozen can in the freezer was modern life made easy in a way that felt almost miraculous to families who had been doing it the hard way their whole lives. Number 2. A home telephone for personal use only. We already talked about having a phone at all, but this goes a step further. Many families who did have a telephone in the 1950s shared a party line with one or more neighboring households. That meant other people could pick up and listen to your conversation, that you had to wait your turn to make a call, and that privacy on the phone was not guaranteed. Having a private line, a telephone that rang only in your home and connected only to your household, was a step above simply having a phone. It was the difference between access and actual privacy. On a party line, you learned quickly not to say anything you did not want your neighbors to hear. You might pick up the phone to make a call and find someone else already using the line, and you would have to hang up and try again later. For anything sensitive, a conversation with a doctor, a discussion about money, a family argument that needed to stay private, a party line was a real limitation. A private line removed all of that. Today, most people carry a private device in their pocket at all times and barely think about it. That level of personal, private communication was a genuine luxury within living memory. Number 1. Central heating. Before central heating became standard in American homes, families managed cold winters with wood stoves, coal furnaces, fireplaces, and space heaters. Heat was not distributed evenly through the house. The kitchen might be warm because of the stove. The living room might be bearable if the fireplace was going. But the bedrooms, the bathroom, those could be genuinely cold, especially in the morning. Getting up in the winter meant getting out of a warm bed and walking into a cold room. Not a slightly chilly room, a cold room, sometimes with frost on the inside of the windows where you could see your breath. You dressed fast, you moved toward the warmest part of the house, and you started the process of building up heat for the day. Children did their homework near the stove or the fireplace because those were the only places warm enough to sit still for an extended period. Families sometimes slept in the same room in the coldest months because body heat and a single heat source made that the only practical option. Central heating, a system that pushed warmth through the whole house automatically, changed the physical experience of home life in a way that is almost impossible to overstate. It changed sleep because every room in the house could be a comfortable temperature at night. It changed morning routines because getting up no longer meant bracing yourself for cold floors and cold air. It changed how families used every room in the house all year round because a room that was freezing in January was not really a usable room. And today, most people set a thermostat and never think about it again. They just expect every room to be the same comfortable temperature at all times, automatically. That expectation is one of the most recent and most profound upgrades in the history of ordinary domestic life. If you have been watching this whole list and feeling something, maybe a little gratitude, maybe a little nostalgia for a simpler time, maybe a little surprise at how recently these things became ordinary, drop a comment below and tell me which one hit you the hardest. Was it the pet one, the phone, the heating? I genuinely want to know, and those comments help more people find this video. If you want to keep going with this kind of content, the video on screen right now goes even deeper into how everyday life in mid-century America was completely different from what we take for granted today. Hit subscribe if you are new here because we do this kind of thing regularly and you do not want to miss the next one. The 1950s were not just a different decade, they were a different standard of living. And almost everything on this list, the plumbing, the cooling, the heating, the phone, the dryer, the pet on the couch, went from something families worked years toward to something nobody even notices anymore. That is not a small thing. That is one of the most remarkable quiet revolutions in the history of ordinary life.